up on the reaction, why I believe every woman should get behind brave JK Rowling after she dared to take on the Scottish Government's ridiculous new hate crime law.
And could the terrible killing of those aid workers in Gaza finally turn the tide of public opinion against Israel?
After Prince Andrew took a prominent role in the royals' Easter walkabout, why a new film about his disastrous TV interview could scupper his comeback plans.
And with the row about Strictly's Giovanni creating a toxic environment, apparently for his partners, Katie Hine tells us why she thinks any woman would be lucky to have him as a dance partner. She's auditioning. Hello and welcome to The Reaction with me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Sarah Vine. We will be here every Wednesday on the Daily Mail's YouTube channel, so make sure you like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Now, world leaders are venting their fury over a deadly Israeli drone strike on an aid convoy in Gaza, which has killed 7 volunteers, including 3 British military heroes.
The convoy of 3 cars, which were clearly marked as working for the humanitarian organisation World Central Kitchen, was targeted 3 times as it moved along an Israeli military-approved route.
Now, Andrew, I have to say, this is, for me, slightly the last straw. About a month ago, I thought about writing a column about Israel saying, you know, I've always been a big supporter of Israel.
Sure.
I completely support its right to exist. I like it from a feminist point of view because I think in that part of the world it's a liberal democracy that believes in equality. Women are, you know, women are equal. There's none of that.
They had a prime minister in 1970.
Exactly. There's none of that sort of, you know, there's no ISIS, Taliban, women can't go to school sort of stuff, and that sort of, so in that respect I'm very supportive of it. And I've been to Israel, and Tel Aviv is a great place. But as somebody who has always felt quite supportive of Israel, I just don't understand what the Israeli government is doing here. I mean, when those terrible atrocities happened, the whole world was behind Israel. The whole world, they had a sort of outpouring, rightly so, of sympathy. And Netanyahu has just squandered every ounce of it, so that the point that even people like me who are Israel has a right to exist, you know, I'm completely behind that. I'm just like, what are you doing, guys? What are you... You can't... They couldn't have done this by accident. Do you know what I mean?
They looked hunted.
Yeah.
They looked like they were... and they got out of one car and into the next car, and that was taken out by a drone, and then another car taken... It did look hunted. The point about Netanyahu, Sarah, is the moment the military conflict ends, he's out of a job. Because he went from being the great Mr. Security, the great protector of Israel, even though he's got all these corruption allegations swirling around him, but he was seen as Bibi is tough on the Palestinians. It was the most audacious, outrageous invasion of Israel since the Holocaust. Yeah. And he was caught asleep at the wheel, and he's been trying to make up for it ever since, which is why he's playing the hard man in Israel. But the moment the war's over or the conflict stops, he's out, and this is about him, and that's a terrible way to prosecute a military conflict.
But I think the people of Israel need to do something about him, because at the moment he is turning them into a sort of quasi-criminal state. He needs to be very careful.
Have to remember that what Hamas did was shocking. We have to remember that Hamas...
Still, the hostages are still being held.
And we have to remember that Hamas are using in Gaza civilians as human shields, that they're back in the hospital, that they're in that labyrinth of tunnels, and also... as you say, that they've still got hostages too, and they are a ruthless medieval sect, and they did carry out that terrible attack on October the 7th, and then they are committed to the eradication of the State of Israel.
Well, of course they are, but also they are representatives of Iran. They are Islamists. They are, you know, like they Iran is a nasty state that tortures and kills women for not wearing hijabs. It's you know, none of that is stuff that I support, and that's why I've always supported Israel, because I've always felt that it was, in a way, the front line against that sort of religious extremist behaviour in the Middle East. But, you know, there comes a point where you have to say, you know, sometimes you have to tell your friends difficult truths, don't you? And I think we need to say now to Israel, you know, what are you doing? Anyway, That's how I feel.
Yeah, it's, and powerfully argued. Now, we're joined now by Mark Almond, Director of the Crisis Research Institute at Oxford, who's written a very powerful piece in Wednesday's Daily Mail. Mark, can I ask you, if this indiscriminate or targeted attack, if it was a targeted attack, does that not make Israel guilty of war crimes? Because humanitarian workers are protected by the International Court and by Geneva Conventions and the United Nations.
Well, whether it makes the Israeli state as a whole guilty of a war crime, clearly this was at the very least a very serious manslaughter, that these aid workers were pursued by a drone which struck on 3 different occasions. So somebody somewhere was the human officer in the Israeli military who decided that these were legitimate targets or didn't really care. So whether I would blame Israel as a whole, certainly the Israeli military has to, I think, ask questions about its discipline, who is ordering what we might call a free fire zone to take place in Gaza. That shouldn't be permitted. There should be targeting people. Now, this could be a failure of intelligence rather than simply a gratuitous act.
But my understanding is that this charity, humanitarian charity, works so closely with the Israeli military. They know in micro detail where their convoys are going to be, where the aid is going to be, which makes it all the more implausible that this happened by accident.
Yeah, I think that it could be, however, though I want to make it clear, I think the Israeli military in this case has behaved grotesquely badly and in a criminally irresponsible way, to put it mildly. Nonetheless, the problem may well be that the NGO communicated its plans with the Israeli officers they have connections with, who are their liaisons, but somehow or other that wasn't communicated to the drone operators. Now, well, we know how many aid workers have necessarily to try to operate in Gaza because of the humanitarian need. This should be an overwhelming priority because, as you've been suggesting already, this is such a moral own goal for Israel, that Israel has had, in many ways, its moral underpinnings pulled out from under it over the last few months, because on the 7th of October, Hamas broke the ceasefire. It swarmed its fighters into southern Israel. It killed well over 1,200 people, took hundreds of hostages. And Israel had a complete moral high ground. And subsequent events, the bombardments, the pushing of the civilian population into a tighter and tighter corner in Rafah in the south, and then this sort of episode where you actually attack people who you have good relations with, who are citizens of a country like Britain, citizens of other countries which are friendly to Israel, help Israel, is almost an act of insanity.
And as you said today in your piece, it doesn't just have ramifications for the sort of immediate area. I mean, it affects all of us globally. I mean, this is a conflict that, has resonated widely on the streets of this country.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, we've seen an upsurge in what I think has to be called anti-Semitism. Of course, a lot of the protesters are genuinely just shocked by the violence and by the suffering. But there have been the appearance of people who are vehemently not only anti-Israeli but anti-Jewish and in a sense anti-West, because they're against tolerance, they're against inclusivity. For all their talk about these sorts of things, they're actually very dogmatic and very aggressive. And this is a great danger. It's also, by the way, worth noting, not just in this country, this emergence of this phenomenon, but in America too. Many American universities now have very anti-Israeli, but also demonstrations taking place outside synagogues and so on, identifying Jews as being, in some sense, part of the Israeli military.
Somehow toxic. But this behaviour on behalf of Israel is just fueling all of that, isn't it? Yeah. It's making it harder and harder for those of us who advocate for the state of Israel to defend it.
And I think there was a very important straw in the wind a few days before these events when ex-President Trump gave an interview to Israeli media, and to their surprise, he called for an end to the war. He was very critical of the Israeli policy. Now, we've seen Joe Biden is worried that some of his voters may be turning against him because American policy is perceived to be too supportive of Israel, too helping of the Israeli military with weapons and so on. And I think people would have assumed Donald Trump would be a number one supporter of Israel. And I think people often sort of deride Trump as a populist, but he does have his finger on the popular pulse. And if I was the Israeli government and Israeli society as a whole, I'd be rather alarmed that Donald Trump is coming out as a peacenik.
Well, thank you, Mark. That's food for thought. I don't know what we're going to do about it.
Mark Almond, thanks, James. We should remember as well, Sarah. I mean, we're obviously appalled by seeing those pictures of those very handsome aid workers, somebody's son, somebody's uncle, somebody's brother. But over 200 have been killed, aid workers have been killed since this conflict started by the Israelis. Indiscriminate killing. It's a lot.
It's very difficult.
But
horrible situation. Let us know your thoughts and email us on reaction@dailymail.co.uk or comment below.
Still to come, why JK Rowling, I've told you before, she's my favourite author, is the hero for standing up to the Scottish Government's ridiculous new hate crime laws, and how a new film about Prince Andrew's disastrous interview is going to scupper any comeback plans he thought he might have. And just why is the BBC giving so much work to the presenting kiss of death, Paddy McGuinness? Now, this is a story that's got Sarah Vine very aerated. If you read her column today, full page, we need to talk about it. It's very, very important. JK Rowling, look, she's a hugely, immensely brave woman.
Yeah.
She's risked the ire yet again of the very vocal trans lobby by throwing down the gauntlet and daring police in Scotland to arrest her under those controversial new hate crime laws which came into effect this week.
On April the 1st, police launched an investigation into the Harry Potter author after she described a string of prominent trans women as men, but later decided not to take any action against her. So I think that what JK has done is amazing, because pretty much thanks, almost, well, I mean, there are lots of people involved in this debate, but she's sort of, I suppose she's the most famous and the most prominent. But thanks to her, we can now have this conversation, because I honestly don't think that 2 years ago we could have done.
But I'm disappointed she wasn't arrested.
No, I know.
Because it would have been...
Well, I mean, the Scottish police aren't that stupid.
Yeah, but the SNP people who made the policy are that stupid. And they would have probably wanted it. But I thought, imagine if they'd arrested her. Imagine if they put her in handcuffs. They'd dragging her off to a police station
and
to be questioned.
There'd have been a queue around the block.
Oh, my God. And they'd be... Not that you'd need to crowdfund for JK Rowling. She's probably a billionaire, or nearly. Yeah. But she is so powerful, so influential because of the power of her books. It would be tremendous, and it would send a real message to the trans lobby around the world.
What I love about her is that she's witty and she's she has this sort of, because she's a writer, and she does these sort of really quite sort of brilliant tweets. But the thing is, ever since this sort of trans thing became a big thing, most women.
How did it become a big thing?
I don't know.
Because stupid politicians raised it beyond the level to which it should be.
I think the thing is,
minority group of people that have got this exalted status.
I think it started out quite well. It started out as a movement designed to make the lives of quite marginalised people who struggle easier. Yeah. And I get that, and I think that's completely fine. So, in the same way that, the sort of LGBT movement started out to make gay lives easier and all that, that's completely fine. But then it sort of, for some reason, it sort of went one step further, and it became a movement which was sort of, seemed kind of intent on giving trans women in particular, because actually it's always really about trans women. Yeah. It's not really about trans men. They, the most sort of aggressive vocal stuff seems to be around trans women. More rights than biological women, and I think that's where the balance started to tip, because people were like, okay, well, we want trans women to have the rights to be trans women, but we don't want to do that at the expense of other women. Yeah. So then we had a situation where trans women were allowed in female prisons, they were allowed in female spaces.
Yes, that went well, because in one particular prison in Scotland, he raped he carried out 2 rapes, and yet he was in a women's prison. And when Nicola Sturgeon was still, God help us, the First Minister.
And then what happened was that a few very nasty men started to take advantage of it. And so you had rapists like Isla, I can't remember his name, Isla something or other, who were men and had committed male crimes, because raping a woman is a male crime. A woman, and then suddenly halfway through their trial they identified as ladies, and then demanded that they were treated like women.
And the state went along with it.
So it was clear that people were playing the system. And that was what we were all worried about, because actually, if you're a woman in jail, you're probably quite vulnerable. But also things like, teenage boys suddenly identifying as teenage girls and then demanding to use the same changing rooms. And we all know what teenage boys are like. They'll do anything to see a pair of bosoms, frankly.
But also you've got these trans athletes who want to compete in...
Exactly. And then you've got strapping 6'4" trans girls
Yeah,
playing netball against 5-footers. So the whole thing just got a bit kind of, Anyway, none of us were allowed to say this, because if we said that, then we were
hate crime.
TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, and then that became very sort of unpleasant and aggressive. And we, in various ways, people like Maya Forstater started to fight back, but Maya Forstater, who expressed these so-called gender critical views, lost her job and had to then do a massive tribunal. There are various high-profile situations. The writer Graham Linehan, who wrote the Father Ted comedy series and various others. He got in trouble. In fact, his life was destroyed by it all. But then JK, I think, partly because she is insulated by her wealth,
she is.
Which is helpful, because it doesn't matter if she gets cancelled, because
she's been cancelled by some of the flipping stupid actors who are in Harry Potter with her.
And I really admire her, because she didn't have to do any of this stuff, and yet she did it, and she stuck her neck out, and as a result, the tide has started to turn. And even though there are some people who still think that anyone who says that a woman can't have a penis is a bigot, there are now lots and lots of people who feel that they can actually have this conversation. And I wrote this piece, I wrote my column today about this, saying that the women of, Britain and the men are behind JK.
Yeah, they are.
And honestly, I've had so many emails from readers saying, yes, we agree, this is proper leadership. This is someone who has, shown courage and in the face of kind of hysterical kind of
bullying.
hate and bullying.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. I think in a world where, our political leaders actually show very little leadership.
It's Keir Starmer who's been all over the place on this issue.
He thinks a woman can have a penis.
He does, and when asked if can a man have a cervix, that's not a straightforward question. Can only a woman have a cervix? That's not a straightforward question. Yes, it is. I can't have a cervix.
You can't have a cervix.
And I don't want one.
No, you wouldn't
Thanks
want one. They're a pain, and they're real not.
Sure.
They're not very nice.
But I mean, that's the man who's going to be our Prime Minister in 6 months' time.
Exactly, and I think people need to
that?
remember this, because we've ended up with this situation in Scotland where the SNP have passed this law, which is basically saying that if you
backed by the Labour Party in Scotland,
backed by the Labour Party in Scotland, that if you object to any, if you say that. Basically, if you object to a trans woman having exactly the same rights of access to women's spaces as a biological woman, you are potentially guilty of a hate crime. I think that really is the thin end of the wedge.
The irony about all this is, so they didn't arrest JK Rowling, the Scottish police. They looked the other way. But there's been over 3,000 complaints to the police already in 24 hours, one of whom is against Humza Yousaf, who is known in Scotland as Humza Useless. He is the new Scottish First Minister. There is a complaint about his conduct when he made a speech a couple of years ago when he said, and often I'm the only non-white person in the room. Well, that'll be because you're in Scotland, mate, where the population of Scotland is 95% white. So why the big surprise? Yeah, something like that. So people there's been complaints to the Scottish police saying it was a hostile speech and it engendered hatred against white people. Ha! You couldn't make it up.
Well, I mean,
and he's a passionate advocate of this mad policy.
This policy, by the way, doesn't include women as, people who could potentially be in a vulnerable situation. That's the thing that I find so difficult, is that, we have all these terrible things, Sarah Everard, you see... And
murdered by a serving police officer.
Exactly, and women, someone like Sarah Everard, who I don't think anybody would have considered her to be a vulnerable woman, and she certainly wasn't in a vulnerable situation. But that awful thing happened to her. She was killed, murdered by a serving police officer. Women do suffer at the hands of men, and so therefore, if you're enabling unscrupulous men, of which there are some, and we've seen this in cases in Scotland and elsewhere, who take advantage of this sort of well-meaning, rule to insert themselves.
I wouldn't even call it well-meaning. I think it was just fanatic.
Well,
it just bordered to the fanatics and the extremists.
I do think that
but they just got
trans
carried
women
away.
and trans men have suffered over the. They've always been vulnerable in the sense that people can be horrible to them because they're not
The trouble is, I do worry, Sarah, that when we get a Labour government, is it going to come in England and Wales?
Well, that's what I think, and I'm very worried about it because I think it's.
So be careful of what you wish for,
what
you vote for.
Yes, and it's about free speech. But I wish some of our politicians would. I mean, Rishi Sunak has, backed JK Rowling, but just feels a bit like he's just jumping on her bandwagon. But I just wish people would just. I just wish for a bit of clarity in our politicians that's not just sort of jumping around from one fashionable cause to the other. Anyway, let us know your thoughts by emailing reaction@dailymail.co.uk or commenting below.
Still to come, why Prince Andrew is simply deluded if he thinks he's making a comeback. The row over the Team GB kit, and despite the wettest 18 months on record, we're facing, you've guessed it, hosepipe ban. Well, he's back. Did he ever really go away leading the pack as he walked front and centre alongside Princess Anne and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson? That's right, Prince Andrew at the Easter Sunday service at Windsor.
That public appearance comes just days ahead of the release of Scoop, the new Netflix film that will dive, not about ice cream, that will dive into the Royals car crash interview on Newsnight regarding his relationship with paedophile Jeffery Epstein.
He just doesn't learn, does he? Because
he doesn't think he's done anything wrong.
Even
That's
though
the fundamental thing.
He wrote a cheque, was it for 10 or 11 or was it 12 million pounds to a girl he claims he may never have met.
I think it was the
Virginia
Queen who wrote the cheque, wasn't
well,
it?
the Queen must have been involved, we think. So he didn't probably know this girl, but 12 million pounds to keep her silence, even though she doesn't have to keep her silence. And then
it hasn't worked.
Banned from public life by Her Majesty the Queen. So we think that's the end of him, but then we saw him, of course, at Windsor Castle on the day of the memorial service for the late King of Greece, the ousted King of Greece. This was, of course, when William famously didn't turn up. We now know why. There he was, looking rather blubbery and bloated, marching to the front, making sure the cameras were on him, hanging around, loitering, introducing people like Tim Lawrence, Princess Anne's husband, to various people there. He'd have known who they all were anyway. It was like he had to be back in the spotlight. Huge criticism of it. And what happens at Easter? It happens all over again. Because the King isn't there to exercise some grip. Prince William is quite rightly with his wife and family while she's recovering and having treatment for cancer. Nobody exercising any grip.
No.
Princess Anne should have handbagged him.
I don't know. I suspect he doesn't. I don't think he has much self-awareness. I mean, that thing that was apparent from that Newsnight interview, wasn't it? That was the thing that came across, I think, most strongly.
He thought it had gone well.
Yes, he thought it had gone well. He doesn't really have any self-awareness. He doesn't really understand how people see him. He doesn't understand that he comes across as quite arrogant and quite bullish. He's very he's a bit of a blunt instrument, isn't he?
I'm sorry, the word is he's an oaf.
Yes, exactly. So, he's just behaving like Andrew. I mean, of course that's what he's going to do. He's Prince Andrew. He thinks that he should be front and centre of everything. Yeah. He doesn't really think he's done anything wrong. He's entitled. It's
just such a bad look because those images of the royal family, which is having a difficult time, we know that, don't we? Broadcast worldwide. How does it play in America? Whereas this Virginia Giuffre story is huge. In the Epstein thing, there is still ramifications. What's her name? Ghislaine Maxwell is appealing against her court sentence. He was a friend of hers. There's a photograph of him with Virginia Giuffre in Ghislaine Maxwell's home. It's terrible. Yeah. It's terrible.
I mean, it should be said that the Duke of York denies any wrongdoing with Virginia Giuffre. But, he's there. He's part of that family and no one is going to dislodge him unless the King says, could you not please do that?
Well, he's obviously preoccupied.
Even if he does do that, I'm not sure Andrew would listen to him.
I've suggested before, Balmoral Estate is very nice. It's opening to the public for a few afternoons in August or July. Yes. So I think we put Prince Andrew in charge behind the scenes. No cameras, but he could do the tours
you could
and
pay
pour the
extra
tea.
To have Prince Andrew take you around Balmoral.
I think it's a great job. Now we know you watch this, Your Majesties and Sirs.
I mean, the thing is,
it'd be a good job for him.
If Prince Andrew had any self-knowledge at all, he would very quietly just, he would just go and do some nice, quiet charity stuff behind the scenes.
Which we wouldn't even know about.
Which was a little bit what actually the Queen did, Camilla, when she was rehabilitating herself with the British public.
Yeah, after the
she
death
sort
of
of
Diana.
knuckled down. She got on and she did all the jobs that perhaps nobody else really wants to do, and she really put in the hours and the time and the effort, and it's paid off because people now do see her very favourably. But Andrew doesn't want to do that.
No.
Andrew is not prepared to
knuckle down and do the work.
He doesn't want to do that. He just wants the glittering prizes without having to lift a finger.
And if
he's always been like that.
The great 1960s political scandal, the Profumo affair, the war secretary John Profumo, who lied about a sexual relationship with Christine Keeler, a call girl, as they used to call them in those days, lied in the Commons in those days, very important, resigned, rebuilt his life behind the scenes, working at a place called Toynbee Hall in the East End, which helped the homeless people and down and out. And his return to public life, I can remember 70th birthday party of Mrs. Thatcher, the Ritz or the Savoy. He was sat between the Queen and Margaret Thatcher. Extraordinary, because he'd done his time.
Funnily enough,
30,
I met
40
him
years.
shortly before he died at a party, and I talked to him for about an hour. He was fascinating.
Yeah.
But he said, I just realised that I had to climb a mountain, and so I just climbed it.
And he did. And his lovely wife, Valerie Hobson, who's an actress, kept out of the public eye as well. They just got on with it. That's what Andrew should do.
That's what Andrew should do. He should just quietly
Failing
go
that,
away.
pour the tea at Balmoral.
Yeah. That's
Do you think he's ever poured his own tea?
I've no idea. Can you imagine Andrew making up tea?
I did have afternoon tea with him when I interviewed him, and there was a valet or an equerry to pour the tea, and he kept saying, have some more cakes. And I said, why do you keep telling me to have some more cakes? I haven't eaten any cakes. You've had 2 already. He likes he's got
I know,
a sweet
he's quite a
tooth.
chubster, isn't he? Anyway, we'd love
and he's
to
put
know...
on a lot of weight. Did you notice that?
Yes, he has.
Got nothing to do. Go and work for a charity.
Yes.
Sir.
We'd love to know your reaction. Comment below or email reaction@dailymail.co.uk.
Well, my allergic reaction this week, can you believe it? How much rain have we had? Deluge after deluge after deluge.
So much rain.
Ridiculous.
I've actually got mushrooms growing in my bathroom. I've had so much rain.
We're awash with it. So Britain, according to the papers today, could face a hosepipe ban this summer. Apparently the water's not being stored properly because, guess what? Those greedy, grasping water companies have not invested in reservoirs.
The proper facilities.
We haven't had a new reservoir in England for 30 years.
And also all the pipes are old and Victorian and they haven't repaired them, so they all leak. So there's a massive amount of leakage.
And there's every time I go to, I walk to the tube to work once a month, the same pipe. It's like the Trevi fountain goes on all day.
The water companies are very definitely
a scandal.
An absolute. I mean, I think this is going to be a massive scandal. I think it's building.
Yeah.
But already we've had this endless scandal about the sewage being pumped into rivers and
Thames Water about to potentially could go bust.
Well, exactly.
With debts of tens of billions of pounds.
And they continue to charge vast amounts of money to customers. I don't know where all that money's gone. Presumably it's gone to the shareholders.
Shareholders, I'm afraid it has.
So I think again, it's.
Well, if there is a hosepipe ban this summer, I only have a small garden at the front, but I will defy it. I will flout it with my watering can.
You and JK Rowling.
Yes, we will be united together. We will be martyrs to the cause. I don't need a hose, but I'm going to water my plants every night because I'm very fond of them.
Okay.
Because I pay enough for my water rates.
Yes. No, I pay an awful lot for my water rates. My allergic reaction this week is the Team GB kit.
Here we go.
Once again, designers have been messing with our flag. This time to make it pink and purple. I really hate the colour purple. It's one of my least favourite colours. Luckily, Team GB have already insisted they won't be wearing it at the Paris Olympics. Just leave our flag alone. Actually,
they did it with the football.
The thing is, I don't really have it's a flag. You know, you can't change the colours of a flag.
No.
I mean, you can have a new flag. You can say we're not going to use the Union Jack.
But we don't want a new flag.
Well, fine, but if you don't want to use the Union Jack, that's okay. You can make your own flag.
But don't change the colour of it.
But you can't change it. It's like I can't suddenly change the colours of the Italian flag because I don't like them or they don't go with my eyes.
The England football shirt a couple of weeks ago, Nike ditched the flag of St George completely. Completely.
Yes, I saw that.
What was the point?
But also, what's this obsession with these sort of kind of non-committal colours? I mean, they're not really any colour. It's sort of a sludge. It's a kind of purpley, bluey sludge.
It's all about patriotism.
But also, the point about a flag. Sorry, can I just? I will shut up in a second. The point about a flag is that when you're on the battlefield, it's an insignia. It's so
course
that
it
people
is.
can see it,
Yeah.
right? So that's why it has to be red and
Really
white,
important.
bright, distinguished colours. If you have a sort of sludgy, bluey
I
grey,
know.
it doesn't function like that.
But
it doesn't
also,
work.
we want Team GB to do really well at the Olympic Games, and so we want to get behind the flag. We also have the national anthem when we get the gold medal,
Yes.
if we win.
Yes.
So I'm completely with Sarah on this for once. Leave it alone. Why do they keep meddling?
I don't know. Do you remember when the Conservative Party turned the Union Jack
torch.
into a tree or a torch?
Yes, they
or
got rid
something?
of the torch. It was David Cameron
That's a bit weird.
because of his green agenda.
Yeah.
But that was in his hug a hoodie phase. Do you remember that?
Yes. I mean, but it's just that these are symbols, and they, just leave them as they are. They're fine as they are.
It's that lovely film in Fiddler on the Roof, tradition.
Exactly.
We like tradition. Let us know what you think. Do you agree with Sarah? You might do occasionally, I know people don't very often. But you can comment below or you can email reaction@dailymail.co.uk.
Now, we love reading your comments and thoughts here on The Reaction. Last week we discussed the UK's relationship with China and whether Beijing has us trapped in a toxic relationship dependent on cheap goods. Cynthia on YouTube says, my toddler once asked me if China is the place where toys come from.
It used to be Father Christmas.
It's the North Pole, isn't it?
Isa in the United States, all the way from the United States. How lovely, Isa. She says, my entire family and I, including the youngsters, haven't bought anything made in China for more than 20 years. We all stopped shopping at Walmart because we refuse to buy things that have been made in China. Well done.
Yeah. Frank says, the label says nothing about our dependency to China. Even if an item is produced in the UK or France or Germany, the manufacturers can be very dependent on China for raw materials. This is a very good point. And other products.
I'm afraid that's right. We also discussed, Meghan Markle's new business venture.
Your girlfriend.
She loves me. Jan says, I'm not a Meghan or Harry fan, but I'd much rather Meghan make some money without trashing the royal family. I do realise she's using the Royal Sussex name though. Of course she is.
CJ says, what an opportunity Meghan had in the royal family. She threw it all away to sell jams and jellies on the internet. Ugh, I love her.
We love that. And Irene says, from senior royal to shopkeeper. It says it all. Well said, Irene. Wish I'd thought of that. And
if you want to message us about any of this week's talking points, you can comment below or email reaction@dailymail.co.uk.
Now it's time for the Showbiz Reaction with our Showbiz Supremo, Katie Hind. Before we talk about the lot of sound and fury at Radio 2 about Paddy McGuinness. How is Taylor Swift, according to the Forbes list, a billionaire?
I can't believe you have to ask this question.
Well, because she sells ridiculous amounts of records, and her Eras tour has sold out across the world.
And I gather she writes her own lyrics and her own words.
She does.
Have you not watched the Netflix documentary?
No. Andrew's done some research, have you?
Can I share with you some of the lyrics from
You have to sing it.
Shake It Off? I stay out too late. I've got nothing in my brain. I go on too many dates. That's what people say.
Sounds like you.
Lucky her, eh?
That's the level of the lyrics. They're ridiculous. They're risible.
No,
do you know what's
brilliant.
interesting about her, actually?
No, nothing.
Is that
apart from her fortune.
A lot of pop stars, they become rich off of being a brand.
Rather old-fashioned.
Well, she's a pop star, isn't she?
Rather old-fashioned, isn't it?
Pop acts,
star.
whatever you want to call them. They make their money off of, being a brand, lots of endorsement deals.
Yeah.
She pretty much has made hers off of her music. I mean, she's
And
got
she's
a fairly
self-made,
decent
isn't she?
property empire.
Right.
Yeah, she comes from a very normal family.
And those concert tours
Nashville.
are phenomenal.
They're phenomenal when they're a sellout, and they're very expensive.
And she's got...
And also Kanye West was really horrid to her.
He was really horrid to her.
Yeah.
What, did he date her?
No, don't you
it's-
remember? She got an award years ago, 2008, I think. She got an award at
She's
the
been
end.
around that long?
She got an award. Listen, just stop shouting and listen. She got an award and went up on stage to collect it. And Kanye West went up on stage, I think he'd had a lemonade maybe, and was horrid to her and said she didn't deserve it and Beyonce should have won it.
Oh.
And then she was bullied a lot by a lot of people, and then Kanye wrote a really horrid sort of sex song about her. So she has been, I think one of the reasons she resonates with women in particular, and her concerts are absolutely jam-packed full of screaming women.
But I'm young, people of all ages.
Yes, but is that she's sort of you know, she's been slut shamed and she's been pop shamed and she's
had the last laugh, hasn't she?
She just gets up and
she's
keeps
the
going.
billionaire.
I'm sorry to say, I do think her music is quite good.
Okay.
And I think she's a good role model to young girls, isn't she? I think you speak to parents of girls, sort of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they're really pleased that they like.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter, who's very cool and doesn't like her, obviously, because she's too cool for school. And she thinks it's silly that I like her. But I do think she's, I think she's quite a sort of, she's got a good work ethic. She's quite a principled person.
I prefer Adele. I do, I like Adele. And I love Olivia Newton-John.
Maybe we'll take you to one of her concerts.
Do I have to?
I've got a spare ticket for the opening night if you want to
What?
come.
Of the Eras tour?
Yeah.
No, sorry, hello.
But how much?
Hello.
How much? I've lost that. If you love Sarah,
in Edinburgh.
you'd let Sarah
Okay,
go
Sarah
with her
can
to
come.
convert her daughter in Edinburgh.
Don't
I love
waste it on
Edinburgh.
Andrew.
Let's go to Edinburgh. You can go to the concert and I'll go up the Royal Mile to the castle.
Okay, right, fine.
Okay, let's talk about Paddy McGuinness, who's not a billionaire.
Well, Paddy McGuinness has had an almighty downfall.
He really has.
In the last year or so. Again. Well, so he's the man who ruined Question of Sport. Of course, he was brought in by the BBC to replace the much-loved Sue Barker.
Yeah, I didn't get that at all.
And the ratings, first of all, they halved, then they just were in free fall.
They deserved it.
And they totally deserved it for the BBC
Stupid
to bring in a northern man. I think they were trying to be all sort of regional.
Yeah.
But not quite realising that he's
And
really
what does
not
he know
very
about
well
sport?
liked. Well, this is the other thing. I mean,
She played at...
Yes.
She won tennis
So didn't he
tournaments.
become famous by presenting Top Gear?
No, he became famous by presenting Take Me Out, which was an ITV show which had the catchphrase "No lighty, no likey." So it was a very sort of
the lyrics written by Taylor Swift.
What does that even mean?
Ridiculous.
So you would have sort of 15 women lined up, and a man would have to pick which one he
that's
liked.
really
very
modern.
It was the other way around as
What's
well.
wrong
So
with ITV?
And so he left. It bombed, and he then moved on to the BBC, where for some reason he was given 4 shows. He had Question of Sport, Top Gear,
Ruined it.
I Can See Your Voice, which was a Saturday night kind of talenty type kind of show,
Don't know that one
and
either.
another one called Catchpoint. They were all axed last year.
What has he got over someone at the BBC? Why has he got this sway?
We've got some suspicions.
Oh.
So there's been this almighty backlash because he's now been given a job at Radio 2. So he's been given Michael Ball's Sunday morning show.
They are destroying Radio 2.
They
got rid
destroying
of
Radio
Ken
2.
Bruce. Lovely guy who died last year, Lily Savage.
Paul O'Grady.
They
effectively
effectively got rid of him. They
Steve
just don't
Wright,
get
of
it.
course.
Steve Wright.
So Michael Ball has been moved into Steve Wright's Love Songs after.
Well, he'll keep that going very well.
He will do. However, Paddy McGuinness has replaced Michael Ball,
Kiss of Death.
Well, he is called the Kiss of Death, the BBC's Kiss of Death. So there's an absolute fury. Again, people are very protective of Radio 2,
Has he ever
aren't they?
presented a radio show?
He stood in for Rylan actually for a few weeks on Radio 2.
But he doesn't have a sort of background in radio.
His background
because
is
there are
no
lots
likey,
of really good radio presenters.
Loads of people
knocking around who could do that.
Sunday Radio 2 is a really, because I used to like to listen to Michael Ball, then I'd love to listen to Elaine Page, songs from the shows.
It's an important day for Radio 2, isn't it? I think.
It is.
Sundays.
It's just going to be switch off. Elaine Page won't like it.
And I think as well,
she won't get the audience.
Listening to Paddy McGuinness is almost worse than seeing him because you can just hear his voice and he's got this very... But people just don't like him.
Somebody at the BBC does, and you've not yet told us who it is.
No, I believe it's somebody who used to work at ITV, where he previously...
She knows something that she's not telling us.
Obviously knows where some
bodies are
buried.
He is part of YMU, which is the talent agency, which of course was home to Philip Schofield, Anthony Deck, Rylan, Claudia Winkleman, lots of Radio 2 talent as well.
Yeah.
Right. So they've got a sort of the way they operate is they say you can have our big star if you can have our slightly lesser star. So there's a suspicion that that's perhaps why Paddy McGuinness is landing these jobs. Well, we'll see. But we will definitely be keeping an eye on the ratings.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'll report back on that to you.
Yeah.
And so the other story this week is that Giovanni Pernice has been behaving badly on Strictly. Is that right?
Well,
don't you have to be tough with your
this is it.
With your celebrity?
It's become a real talking point, this, because there's now 4 of his previous partners that have reportedly been upset at the way he's behaved towards them when they've been.
What do you mean? Because he's just been saying that they're rubbish.
Well, no. But this is no one. Well, Amanda Abington, who was his most recent partner last year, who left the series before it ended.
Why did she leave? Because of him?
Well, she claimed she had PTSD.
From what?
From performing on the show.
Post-traumatic stress
disorder. PTSD from being on Strictly.
Isn't that what people get when they get
they're fighting
bomb
in
damage in
I'm
Afghanistan?
sorry, you can't have PTSD from
please.
being on Strictly.
So
you have PTSD from being here with us.
Oh dear, no, don't say that.
I mean, that is ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Silly, yeah.
So she asked the BBC for CCTV footage of her rehearsals with Javani because she was hoping that she could, reportedly hoping that she could bring a legal claim against the BBC for getting PTSD. Now the whole thing's outrageous. She's never actually come out on the record and said this. So Javani has been sort of slandered by this, not being able to respond. Now the BBC know full well that he wants to win. Like if I went on Strictly, I'd want to be with Javani. Oh, I think you'll be there before me, won't you?
Well, not dancing with Javani.
Sarah will be
not
the first.
dancing with Javani. If I'm on Strictly, I'm dancing with a woman.
A terrible dancer.
Javani is, as well as being incredibly handsome, he's a winner. And he wants to win. Yeah. So what is that? If you want to go on Strictly and have a little bit of a nice time, have a little, totter around.
No, I mean it's meant to be hard.
It's meant to be hard, and also he wants to win. So he has the attitude.
And they get well paid for it.
They get very well paid for it, and he takes the attitude that he wants to push his partner as hard as he thinks that they can be pushed.
Yeah.
So that's what he does.
I like him.
And so the public love him, the public back him, the BBC are backing him.
Good.
But there's Amanda Abington, Ranveer Singh of Good Morning Britain.
Oh, yeah, I know Ranveer.
She was partnered with him. She reportedly was upset at how abrasive he was.
She did very well on it,
she
and she lost a lot of weight.
He got her to the final.
He did.
He got her to the final. And she wasn't the most talented, she'd say herself.
She'd admit that.
And then you've got Laura Whitmore, who didn't like him, but she doesn't like anybody. And then most recently, Faye Tozer came for, apparently was also upset. She's his partner from 2018.
Remind me who Faye Tozer was.
Faye Tozer was in Steps. 5, 6, 7, 8.
Why is she on Strictly? Because if she was in Steps, presumably she could already dance.
Well, she did make that's the thing. He got her to the final. So there's lots of things.
I think there should be a ban on people who can actually dance doing
Stuff. Yeah,
well, definitely.
You're not kidding. I quite agree.
It's so annoying.
You know, basically it's got to be.
You want to watch them improving.
Exactly.
You want to
see
the
improvement. Because there has to be a journey. It's no good just showing up and being already a brilliant dancer and then just dancing a bit more brilliantly.
I know.
Well, this is the problem we had with Leighton Williams, didn't we, last year? That
he
was so good. He was better than the pro.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of people were.
Yeah.
But isn't Giovanni Italian?
He's Italian.
They're very rude. I know this.
Well, that's
just who they are.
Yeah,
it's just not their fault.
I think we should
it's a cultural thing.
I think we do laud him, and actually, having spent some time looking at the Mail Online comments from the public about him, they love him.
Good.
And they think, why would you not want to win? Why would you go on Strictly and just go...
But the thing is, I think people make a mistake. They think that Strictly is... I mean, it's been around for so long, but in the olden days, it was a proper journey. You know, you turned up, you were Anne Widdecombe. Yeah. You had 8 left feet and the size of a pudding.
But John Sargent was worse.
And you had to work for it.
Yeah.
But now they sort of seem to think, this is an opportunity for me to wear a few sequins and some nice makeup and get my next presenting job.
Get my next
and that's what that's not what this is supposed to be.
No, well, I'm with this bloke 100%.
So are the BBC. So it's the 20th anniversary of Strictly
this
year. Yes, 20 years. So they're anticipating a massive year. They've got lots of treats on for the viewers.
Well, they get some decent celebrities that we've heard of.
Well, I did ask.
So I don't have to keep asking who's that.
I asked this question a few minutes ago to the BBC. I don't think they care.
Who are they going to get? Any thoughts?
I don't know who they're going to get.
Katie Hind. Katie Hind.
They wouldn't have me on there.
Yeah. I think that's fascinating.
It's a really
interesting... Do we know who the lineup is? Do you have any sense of who they're getting?
It's too early for that.
But honestly, post-traumatic stress disorder from being on a dance group is pathetic.
Well, this week,
ridiculous.
Rachel Riley, who actually was partnered with Pasha Kovalev, who she's now married to, she said this week, too, that she got PTSD from Strictly.
Insane.
They should come and work here, shouldn't they?
Yeah. They really should. They should spend a day on the news desk and then they will really work out what PTSD is all about. Well, Katie, thank you. That's all very enlightening. I'm afraid that's it for today. Join us again next Wednesday for more reaction to the stories making the headlines.
And make sure you like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. So see you again next Wednesday. Goodbye.
Bye.